Welcome to our Kabbalah intro. Today we're going to talk about a topic that might confuse you a little bit due to the scientific approach in which we view reality, which we were all taught to accept as the ultimate truth. And you see, it's not necessarily so. Don't get confused with that and other schools of thought, in terms of Eastern school of thought, in terms of, Chinese medicine and so on and so forth. I'm trying to deal with you, explain to you today, with your permission, the different types of chomer and how does, chomer means materialistic aspects, and how does it really reflect in the four different stages of creatures or creations that we have in this world, which we say that are domem, someach, chai, and medaber. So, Sam, if you could just tell Avner to just turn the camera off. So, the sages of Kabbalah divide every matter of that we have, whether it's solid like rocks and so on, or plants, anything that grows, animals and humans, to four different elements. I know the Chinese have five, this one, and don't get confused with Greek philosophy. It's completely different. And those four elements are fire, wind, water, and earth. And the difference between the object is in the proportion of each of these elements as it's being reflected into the item itself, or the element itself. So, for example, there is object that one element is going to be the main essential component of them, and certain object, others that are more dominant and form a majority of that matter. And the quality of those objects, and I'm saying object, I'm talking about the four different stages of existence in reality, really depends on the differences in the ratio between those elements themselves. When we talk about the tzura refers to the inside. It's determined those proportions and the qualities of that object itself. Now let's see exactly what we're talking about. Seems a little bit of a sluggish introduction, but try to do my best. So the material, the chomer of something that is domem, solid, is also compiled from four different elements: fire, wind, water, and earth. And the tzura, the spiritual aspect of that, is what we call a koach hamechaber, the connective tissue, the connective element that, in other words, the spiritual ability or the quality of that object that puts it together. And that what determines how the proportion is going to be of each and every one of them. The chomer of a tzomeach, plants, things that grow, also compiles from those four elements, but together with the koach hamechaber, that they call it the spiritual connective tissue that exists in solids, again, like rocks and so on, there is another spiritual force in it, and that's called koach hagidul v'atzmicha, the force of growth and development, too, right? And that koach is divided into three parts. What we call a koach hazan, the ability to, or the force that gives nourishment, that the plant needs to nourish, or that allows the process of nourishment from the earth and so on and so forth, and gives all the appropriate nutrients to the branches and all the other parts of the plant. The second one is the koach hamegadel, the growing element, that gives the ability of the plant to grow and to continue developing and so on. Koach hamolid, the power that gives ability to multiply, that gives it exactly like him. If you plant, for example, if you plant an oak tree, you're not going to get wheat. You're going to get exactly the same thing, the same species. And these are, by the way, things that the Chachmei Kabbalah wrote throughout the years, for hundreds of years. Now, then we have the Chomer HaChai of a living creature, also has the 4 elements, as we said. And in addition to the forces that has the domem, the solids, and the growing plants and so on and so forth, he has another spiritual power that's called Hakoach HaChiyuni. Hakoach HaChiyuni, it is the force that allows them movement and the force that allows them feeling in the senses of the animal. And we need to understand that animals have what we call sechel behemi. Sechel behemi, which means animalistic intellect, right? That helps the animal distinguish between somebody who is a friendly or foe, somebody that wants its good, its benefit, or somebody who is a threat to them. And also the whole systems that we have in terms of instincts and reflexes that animals have, each animal to its own kind. For example, the instinct that a frog would have will be different than a wolf would have, right? But they all share the same thing. Now, humans, which have the ability to speak, also has those 4 elements in them compiled, which is, again, the fire, the wind, the water, and the earth. And in addition to the forces that we said that have it in the domem, the solids, the plants, and the animals, a person, a human, has another spiritual force that we call that Neshama, the soul. And that Neshama includes all the spiritual abilities that the person has, a human has. That means his qualities, all his qualities. He's cheap, he's this, and something that is unique only to humans. A horse, for example, is not cheap and is not generous. A horse is a horse. Those qualities are unique to humans themselves. And the main ingredient in the neshama is what we call koach hasechel, is our intellectual power. From a principle point of view, or from an ideal point of view, let's define the inner meanings of those 4 elements, domem, solids, and so on and so forth. And we're going to therefore take the inner parts of the human existence, human reality, or human spiritual power, and we're going to give it the ability to want to pursue them to become better in everything that they do. In other words, our drive to become better. A horse does not want to become better than another horse. A horse is a horse. A dog is a dog. A dog does not want to become better than a cat or from a different dog. A human wants to become better in everything he does, to progress, to develop. And that's something that is very, very unique to humans, among other things, but that's very unique to humans. We spoke off the record about Rabbi Ashlag and his view of things. I just want to mention it, even though I don't really consider myself one of his followers or Hasidim. However, since many times today, when you talk about spirituality, those concepts are brought, I'm just going to mention them. And according to Rav Ashlag, he called that urge to develop, he names it haratzon lekabel, the will to receive. And that will to receive is divided, according to him, into 4 different segments. And this is haratzon lekabel, the need to receive only what I needed for my physiological existence. The second one is the will for, should I call it, for extra stuff, like, for example, physical pleasures that is beyond the basic needs of the body. Like, for example, I would like to have a bath with, jacuzzi, and so on and so forth. The physical, that it's not needed to you, right? And that is concluded or condensed into what we're talking about, behemic desires only. Then the third one is the urge for kavod, honor, and sarara, means ability to rule and to control other people. And that is something that only, again, human develop or have. And the fourth one is I would say most people, is the need or the desire to acquire more knowledge, to become more intellectual. So, and he talks about this, he compares that to 4 different levels, those 4 different levels to the 4 different levels of existence, the first one will be, parallel to the domem, to the stones, and so on and so forth, all the way to the upper one, when, according to Rav Ashlag, the desire to acquire knowledge, it will be corresponding with the level of a human that is on top of all. So therefore, according to him, the highest level that a person would like to reach or could reach is the need to acquire knowledge and so on and so forth. And that's really what defines him on a higher level than that. I mean, that's what really exists in him. So it depends on the person. So what he takes the soul of a human and then further develops that divides it into 4 different parts. And based on that, you can get a different understanding of where a person is coming from altogether. You should know that, for example, we call people who are intellect in Hebrew, they call intellectuals and so on and so forth, anshe ruach, people who have ruach in them. Because these are, not necessarily always is a good thing, but, nevertheless it is. So that's very important to understand. Now, if you take what we said, and now we use it as a contemplating vehicle or as tools to analyze what's standing in front of us, you could get a very different view on people based on what they compile. And now you could understand why a person is more this than the other. Now, if we're going to take what Rav Ashlag said and apply it and develop it a little further, you would see that this is how it comes. If you are a person who is always immersed in bodily pleasures, right? So you cannot expect this person, if this is a main focal point in life, to develop into a level of acquiring knowledge, to become an intellectual, because he lives on a very low level of existence. Yes, he's higher than a behemoth, sometimes very close to it, but higher than a plant, higher than a stone, or that kind of, what we're talking about, solids that we're talking about. However, he could not elevate himself. One has to give. You can't be operating on great needs on all of them. In other words, if you want to become, you can eliminate them completely because these are there in place for a reason. In other words, let's say if we talk about the first one, is everything that you need physiologically. So that's going to be, according to him, on the lowest level of a human level, which will be similar to the existence of a stone in terms of that. However, you have to have it. But the ratio is determined upon you. That's why if you choose to elevate yourself, you will understand that you cannot eliminate those things. In other words, and that's Judaism. We don't expect you to fast for 40 days or not to be with a woman for the rest of your life, or not to drink, to do all these things. On the contrary, they're there. But you have to control the percentage in which they exist into your life. Why? Because those actions will affect in the way who you are spiritually. And the tzura, the spiritual shape of you, will be determined according to that, or based on that. Now, if a person wants to reach a certain level, a higher level, he needs to understand now you have the tools in which areas of your life you have to call it let go. There are certain things, basic things you have to do. Like you have to eat. There's a physiological needs of your body. But if you obsess with that, with food and so on and so forth, you can't elevate yourself spiritually, because it would overwhelm you. That quality will overwhelm you. And that's something that we need to understand. What is this all about? And now, is that something that, we need to understand, and we need to really get the grasp of it. And we cannot, when you dwell into these things, you cannot use physiological or scientific terms that we have today. The same thing regarding a person. If we're talking about the fire, right? So we talk about the hot temper of a person. If we talk about wind, right? That's called the Ruach. It's going to be much more intellectual. If we're talking about afar, earth, very earthy, right? How do we call a person who is in Hebrew, the opposite of a Talmid Chacham, of a scholar? We call it Bur ve'am haaretz. Bur is an ignorant person. However, Bur really is a borrowed term from a concept that comes in to describe type of earth, of dirt. Adamat Bur is an cultivated land. So a person who is a complete ignorant person, he is like an uncultivated land. So he has a lot of that. That element is in him. Now, you could, again, analyze yourself, which you should do. Don't analyze others. You should really analyze yourself and see where you need to really, what affects you and where you hold it. And if you really want to get into that level, you really have to watch out to which attribute is actually controlling you, and so on and so forth. Now, so as we said before, the shape, the tzura, is the essence of the object. And God, HaKadosh Baruch Hu, determined that every object have its own special and specific shape. Why is that? In order for that item or object or creation to do is functions that is required to do, by definition, by creation itself. Now, since mankind is the focal point of creation, therefore the jobs or the assignments that human got are superior to any other type of creation. That's why his shape, his tzura, his spiritual ability is superior to all. It's superior to all. So if we're going to look at the tzura, when I'm using the name tzura, the shape, and I'm referring to the spiritual phase, aspect of a person, we could see two different dimensions that, in reference to humans. One dimension is what we call chiyuni, whatever is needed. And the other dimension is we call sichli rikshi, emotional, intellectual. Those function of the essential dimension, they're not different than those functions by animals, right? in terms of eating, multiplying, and so on and so forth. Therefore, the appropriate shape that to that dimension will be the tzura of Baalei Chaim, the same way as animals do it. And we eat, animals eat. We multiply, animals multiply. And it's done the same way. However, the neshama of a person really includes, since we said it includes everything, to the essence of a man. And don't forget that man is created in the image of God. And man, what defines man most of all is ability to choose. And the ability to choose we're giving from God as a gift to humans directly. And therefore, with the ability of men, because we have an ability to choose, we could fix this world, and we could, by fixing the world, become partners in creation. Therefore, what we call nishmat ha'adam, the neshama of the person, is the second element, which the second element we say is emotional, intellectual. That's the neshama. Now, the sages of Kabbalah, the masters of Kabbalah, gave names to all those shapes, and they call them, and they define them. And they call it Nefesh, Ruach, Neshama, Chaya, and Yechidah. Now, in English, they're all called soul, but in Kabbalah, it's been divided into 5 different segments. We're going to talk about the first 3, and we're going to leave the second 2 for later time, God willing. And that dimension really includes all the kochot, all the forces that we said before, the koach ha-mechaber, what holds the element together, all the atoms together, which we have, like, for example, in rocks and so on, in solids, the ability to grow, which we said comes from plants, and the ability to move, which exists in animals. And yes, mankind includes all these qualities inside of him, and that is all included with what we call the Nefesh. The Nefesh is the lower element that causes things to happen. That's what causes things to happen. That's what is in charge of us, of our desire to eat and so on and so forth. That's where you cannot eliminate this, because it was put in place in order for you to exist. You might say, I don't want to be like an animal, so I'm not going to eat, but you're going to die. That's why HaKadosh Baruch Hu God created this urge in us in terms of hunger and wanting to eat as like a security blanket for us, a security mechanism we can eat. However, how much you're going to eat and what you're going to eat, that's already up to you. Now, for example, the sages of Kabbalah said that the liver is the place that the nefesh is being held. That's the liver. Okay? The ruach, which is, ruach is, in free translation, is going to be we call it wind. Ruach is wind. So, which is a superior spiritual power or ability that, in a way, is somewhat kind of responsible for the emotional aspects of the person. That's the ruach. That's responsible of your qualities, your spiritual qualities, in terms of who you are, in terms of your midot, your qualities. That ability is in charge on developing our wills, our certain desires, our ambitions, and again, any other quality that men would have. That is called ruach. And in that spiritual power, also, that's where the ability to distinguish between good and bad, it's also there. And therefore, all those actions that are included or are tied to what we call ruach, that's the essence of the person. The heart is the limb or the part of the body that is associated with the ruach, right? We say lev chomed, the heart desires, so it comes from the heart, And by the way, you see it. It's so interesting to see it. And there is a certain, I will have to say that there is a certain similarity between, let's say, Chinese medicine and those aspects. Because, and I'll give you an example. If a person doesn't have Ruach Chiyoni, he doesn't want to eat, and by the way, depressed, let's say he's depressed. One of the forms of depression is lack of appetite. The Chinese, lehavdil, but the Chinese will tell you that there's probably something stagnant in your liver. When a person is depressed, what do we say in ancient cultures? You hear sad music, you say, oh, my liver, jigar, right? In Persian, right? You say, the liver, right? It's associated with the liver. In Hebrew, in ancient Hebrew, there's no such thing as depression. Dikaon means oppressed, but in ancient Hebrew, it's called marash chora, bitter bile. In other words, black bile. When your bile in your gallbladder becomes black, that means that you're depressed, and that would affect your liver as well. So that's the association, right? So the heart is for this. Now the neshama, the spirit, which is the spiritual, intellectual, that conducts the person. That's what most people always refer to. The job of the neshama, of your spirit, is to really to be able to control. You can eliminate, to control, and to fix your bad qualities that would serve together in a combination in your ruach. The ruach is a mixture of good and bad. The job of the neshama is to be able to identify it and to fix it. You cannot eliminate. It's there. The job is to fix, not to destroy, to fix. So to fix those bad qualities, to overcome the desires, in other words, to control the desires, and to really empower everything that you have, all your abilities and all the potential there is in you as a human, that includes all creation, because again, in you, in us, there are the qualities and the abilities of all forms of creations. To take this, plus whatever we were given from the animal kingdom, the plant kingdom, and the solid kingdom, call it for that matter, together with your abilities as a human to do avodat habore, to do what we call God's work. And the moach, the brain, is the organ that is associated with the place of your spirit, of your neshama. Now, as we said, we're going to talk about, God willing, about the two others, which is chaya and yechida, but we're going to talk about it further down the road. So that is very important to understand also. And why am I talking to you about this? Because if you understand that a man is olam katan, is a small world, if you could understand the powers that exist within you with its appropriate symbolism, you'll be able to understand also the powers that happen in the world itself. And based on this knowledge and the way they interact and how to fix and how they work, you'll be able to fix the world better. And ultimately, we said that the whole goal is to really to fix this world, to become partners in creations. Now, we're going to stop the recording. I'm going to answer your questions straightforward. However, don't forget that if you want to reach us, if you have any questions, we can reach us as rabbigaon@gmail.com. You could check us on yeshiva.etzion.com if you want to become a partner in the learning and help the yeshiva in this time and any time. You could join us on learning, and you could also contribute by helping us in terms of donating. You could spread the word out and check us on all the other social medias for other ways to connecting to us. And I hope that it helped you understand better. It's not so easy to explain those concepts, but nevertheless, we try to do our best to explain them. And I would like to dedicate this shiur to refuah shlema of everybody that needs it, to the speedy recovery of anybody who needs that, to the hatzlacha of Fegel Sarah Bat Rivka Rosa, and to the hatzlacha of our dear friend Mike, and of course our dearest friend Rachel Chaya Bat Sarah. God bless them. God bless you. Have a great day.